Well, where is that conversation going? Hey, guess what? We'll kick off with that, with a review, that review of the suspension of the EFCC chairman. But from an institutional perspective this morning, you know, you've listened to a number of people, even reference the conversation with Mr. Adenkalu yesterday on Politics Today, when he was talking about that and saying, look, is it a banana peel, that office? Let's have that conversation this morning with Mr. Wahab Shittu, who is a senior advocate of Nigeria. He joins us here in the studio. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, from an institutional perspective, and history judges us fairly by noting that there has been no EFCC chairman, unless I missed it, that has eased out of office without being suspended, without one allegation or the other against them. What does that, do you question that in any way? It's like it depends on the whim and caprice of whoever it is that appointed them to, or maybe the person that takes over from them to either retain them or remove them. What do you make of that?
Well, thank you for that question. I think every right-thinking Nigerian or every right-thinking, you know, commentator or observer of what is happening will be concerned. I happen to have been prosecuting for EFCC since inception.
Oh.
So I've virtually related with all the chairmen or acting chairman of the EFCC, from No Ribadu to Ibrahim Lamorde to Waziri and to Magu and now to Bawa. And so it gives us, in terms of concern, it gives us a lot of concern that an office, an institution of that magnitude, because the EFCC is not just it's not a local institution, it's an international institution, because the war against corruption is of international dimension. The international community is interested in the subject of corruption in the way it is interested in the subject of terrorism. When we talk of corruption and terrorism, those are issues beyond of international concern, beyond local or domestic borders. So in terms of perception by the international community, when you have frequent changes in the leadership of an institution as important as the EFCC, it sends negative signals that you don't have stability and that that the institution is not sufficiently strong enough to be able to withstand shocks. And that should give us a general concern.
But what do you think, what can you say? I mean, glad to know, at least for those who don't, that you've been there from the very, very beginning.
Yes. Okay.
And you understand, well, one could say, one way or the other, you understand the processes of the institution.
Yes.
What could be responsible for the slippery nature of that office? Is it in its operation? Is it in the openness of the office of the chairman to people? Is it in the fact that the man is available to be approached by just about anybody? Is it in his vulnerability? What exactly do you think could be responsible for that?
All these factors that you have enumerated and more. But I will single out one particular factor, the element of vested interest. The fight against the war against corruption is not a tea party. It is a serious business. If you want to identify one single militating factor in the way of our developmental process against our developmental strides, is a factor of corruption and impunity. So corruption is the elephant in the room. When you have a breakdown in systems, it is corruption. When you have a breakdown in institutions, it is corruption. When you have a breakdown in ethical and moral values of the society, it is corruption. When you have a breakdown in societal traditions, it is corruption. So everything, so it's at the heart of our national problem.
It is a little concerning, Mr. Shittu,
yes,
when you're saying we're talking about corruption, about an anti-corruption agency.
Yes.
Corruption in an anti-corruption agency, saying that corruption is bedeviling an anti-corruption agency.
It is something of serious concern if that is proven. Because when we make comments in the public space, we should make it advisedly. If you have proven incidents of corruption in an anti-corruption agency, it underscores the degree, the extent of the problem.
But, you know, just
in our collective consciousness.
Pardon me, sir. I mean, you've, as you said, been there from the very beginning.
Yes.
Each one of the chairmen of the EFCC has been suspended based on allegations of corruption and have been investigated. Bukola yesterday was asking questions around which of those reports have ever seen the light of day, which of those so-called indictments have ever really seen the light of day and been of any value. So but what then people would begin to think maybe it's just, as you said, vested interests of the appointers, or how does one put it?
I said a number of factors, including the pervasive one, in my opinion, is the element of vested interest.
Whose interests?
The interests of the ruling elite, the interests of the political class, and the interests of those who are opposed to the fight against corruption. I'm not necessarily saying that some of those allegations may or may not be true.
Speaking of interests, Mr. Shittu, I wonder if, you know, this specific case is being viewed with enough objectivity. Yes, it's true that, you know, some are saying that, you know, is the office not becoming a banana peel? But when we look at, you know, the trajectory that has brought us here, not one, not two civil society organizations, you know, have demanded the resignation from office of this EFCC chairman that has now been suspended. As a matter of fact, the coalition of Arewa Council, to be precise, led us to understand, well, there are allegations anyway, but the level of malfeasance, you know, that have been brought up, they're very concerning. So should we begin to look at that, you know, with a more objective lens, rather than, you know, dismissing it entirely as a product of vested interest?
Well, when I made my comment, I wasn't particularly referencing the Bawa case. I was just talking in general terms. But if you want me to be very specific about this Bawa case, what I would say is that there are several narratives there, and my approach will be analytical. There's a narrative that says that oh, corruption may be fighting back. That narrative is there. There's also the narrative that said a house built with Shittu will ultimately be felled with by the morning dew. That's another perspective. And if you read the Transparency International's comment on this issue, they said, oh, they are not surprised that ultimately the changes are because of personal interest. Everybody wants a chairman. Every regime wants to change the chairman of EFCC. That's the perception, the perspective of Transparency International. But speaking very frankly, you see, and this is the approach I want to recommend. The fight against corruption should be fought holistically. If there's evidence of corruption, even within the EFCC itself, it should be fought. Nobody is above the law. But in the specific case of Bawa, Mr. Abdulrashid Bawa, I want to also have an open mind. I want to also insist on thorough investigation. that will preserve the, the fair hearing of the person. Anybody who's accused of corruption is entitled to fair hearing. Whether the allegation we are talking about is committed by those we consider our friends or those we consider our enemies. We should, because it can be anybody's turn. It can be anybody. But what we should insist upon is that when allegations are made against anyone, any suspect, including Bawa, including any big man, we should advocate that such allegations are thoroughly investigated, devoid of vested interest.
Speaking of advocacy,
yes,
that this is independent of the suspended EFCC chairman.
Yes.
This is looking at the institution itself.
Yes.
So regardless of tenure or who's occupying it, there's always been talks about the manner of negotiation, of fighting corruption within that institution itself, how there are negotiations that you you return this, for this. In fact, one of the allegations that have been put forward before his assumption of that office was how he negotiated the sale of trucks, where kickbacks were given. Those are allegations. So should we begin to look at that institution? You've worked there for some time. What can you tell us?
I've not worked there.
You've prosecuted.
Yes,
you've prosecuted. You've prosecuted for the commission. What can you tell us about that?
Well, you see, the EFCC as an agency in Nigeria is also a reflection. Could be a reflection of the general decay that we have in society to itself. It's not immune. There's no institution in Nigeria that is immune from this element of corruption. So I'm not holding brief for anyone. But what is I think there are various ways of fighting corruption. One way that is advertised that we see is the issue of prosecution of suspects. There's also the element of plea bargain. These are best practices all over the world, not quite peculiar to Nigeria. But where it is proven that in exchange for some kind of gratification, bring this and I will release you. If it is proven, then that is the area we should look at. Thorough investigation of criminal allegations with a view to prosecuting the culprits with steep penalties. You understand me? So I've heard a lot of stories about what is happening in there. They remain in the realm of conjecture. What is important and what we should insist upon is that allegations will be thoroughly investigated. Some people have asked me whether the president has the powers to suspend the chairman of EFCC. Yes, he has the powers. If you look at Section 11 of the Interpretation Act, it says anybody who has the powers to make appointment into a substantive position also has the power to suspend.
So what do you make of those who are quoting the EFCC Act about the process or procedure of removing the EFCC chairman?
Yes, the EFCC Act is a statutory enactment, which is also subject to the Interpretation Act. The Interpretation Act is a law that interprets all statutory instruments, including the EFCC Act. And that act by Section 11, and I invite you to go and read it very well, it says that if an appointing authority has the powers to appoint anyone into a substantive position, such an appointing authority also has the power to appoint the same person into to act, or even take such other measures, including suspending the person from office.
So if
but the only thing is that the duration of that suspension is not specified in the Interpretation Act. So there's no question about it that the president acted within his powers.
So
in suspending the
EFCC chairman.
The EFCC chairman
Indefinitely.
Of course.
And even sack?
No, you see, it's yes, appointing the chairman of EFCC, he has to go to the Senate. But there's no such requirement for
for removing the person in office.
So if the appointment and removal of the person in that office is subject to the whims and caprices of the president, how does, you know, the system then guarantee the stability of that office, and by extension, the stability that is needed for the fight against corruption?
Well, that's the advocacy. You elect representatives to the Senate, to the House of Representatives. Maybe you are saying, and I want to join you in that advocacy, that we should take a second look at the EFCC Act with a view to effecting some necessary amendments in order to insulate that, you know, institution.
Do we do the same thing for the Interpretation Act?
No, yes, of course. The Interpretation Act, to the extent that it provides that somebody can act in that position indefinitely.
Okay. Now, Mr. Shittu, does it... two things are products of Bukola's questions. One of them is whether or not, you've talked about the need for us to make sure that all allegations are properly investigated. But what are the allegations in this case? There are those
what we have, the narrative in the public space that we have now is that he's suspended for witty allegations.
Which
allegations? Then we really don't know the nature of those allegations. Well, can we say that those allegations relates to economic and financial crimes or to elements of corruption? Then if those allegations relate to those specific offenses that have alleged offenses that have highlighted, the question you want to ask yourself whether the DSS is the appropriate body to take him into custody. When we have the ICPC, when we have the EFCC, when we have the Nigerian police.
So what is the intention in that regard?
Well, I don't know the nature of the allegations.
No, I mean, what is the intention when it is the DSS that has taken up
when
the
DSS is calling to take up any allegation? Maybe those allegations border on national security. You understand me? Or security interest. I wouldn't know, and I will not sit here to speculate. But what I can say for free is that, and what I will advocate here openly, is that no one can question the prerogative of the president to take the action the president has taken. Secondly, we also insist that Bawa, who is down in the hot seat, must be given all fair hearing. And then we should have an open mind at this stage. I don't want to join the bandwagon of people who start condemning anyone without being taken through the judicial process and found guilty or innocent. So I want to believe my mind is open. I want to insist on due process for him, rule of law. And again, I want to also say that nobody is also above the law. If he's found guilty, the law should take its course. Of course, no matter how big anyone is, the law is bigger.
Malcolm.
All right, let me ask you this. I think this might be taking you back a little, even though, I'd also been very curious as to whether you thought that the DSS, should be the one doing the investigation on Mr. Bawa, considering the rivalry we had seen at the beginning of the tenure of President Tinubu. But let me take you back and ask you, did this suspension of the EFCC chairman come as a surprise to you?
Mr. Shittu can't hear you yet, but as soon as that is possible, we'll bring him back to you. But the question she's asking is along the line of whether or not you think that.
Well, if you
go ahead, Marco. Go ahead, Marco.
Okay, I was just asking Mr. Shittu if the suspension of the EFCC chairman came as a surprise to him. If it came as a surprise to you, tell me why. If it doesn't, or if it didn't, tell us why.
Well, he can't hear you again, Mark. I sincerely apologize, but the question Mark is asking is whether or not you thought that Mr. Bawa's suspension came as a surprise to you. If it did or if it did not, why?
Well, I want to say categorically that given what has played out since the advent of EFCC. I'm beyond shock. I'm prepared for anything. So it did not come to me as a surprise at all. If you recall that the circumstances under which his predecessor was also shoved aside, is worrisome. I defended his predecessor throughout the proceedings. And up till now, no proven allegation against Ibrahim Magu.
But the panel...
No, where's the report? Where is the panel's report?
But they made recommendations.
Where are the recommendations? Where's the white paper? You understand me? You take an individual through that kind of process and question his integrity, and at the end of the day, there's no report. Well, I don't know whether you have seen a copy of the report. I'm the lawyer who defended Magu throughout. I don't have the report. There's no white paper. After that incident, Magu has been promoted as Assistant Inspector General of Police. You promote somebody who's indicted. I'm asking you. So these are the things we should question. We should insist on due process. So I take the view here that Magu, some people didn't want his face and just simply shoved him aside. And they could even have asked him to resign without going through the rigors of setting up a panel or an inquiry, at the end of which you have not seen the report, at the end of which there's no white paper.
So can we begin to look at each EFCC chairman that has been removed from office one way or the other independently, or should we categorize all of them as having been witch hunted?
I think we should look at it independently. And in looking at it independently, we should do so with an open mind. I will not sit here to make a general indictment on any of those who have served this country. Because serving as EFCC chairman or acting chairman is a very heavy responsibility. Anybody fighting corruption is endangering his life. In a country that sees that corruption as a major elephant in the room. You understand me? So if you want to deal with people like that, you should deal with them in accordance with the prescriptions of the rule of law. Due process. And all of us will insist that when allegations are made, not only against any EFCC chairman, against anyone, we should insist on investigation-led arrest, not arrest-led investigation. There's a decision between that. You should investigate and have a prima facie evidence and have a basis for proceeding before you arrest. You don't arrest and start fishing out for evidence, and which is one of the problems we have here.
You think that's what's happening in this case?
No, I'm not saying this. Like I said, in the case of Bauer, my approach is to have an open mind. I cannot speak for him, neither can I speak against him. All I can insist as a law officer is that he should be given fair hearing to determine whether he's guilty or innocent.
Okay, well, let's see if my colleague Markwe can, whether you can hear her now. Markwe, go ahead.
Well, I think that you've answered my question with regards to whether or not there was any surprise for you, but you are not able to separate whether this is political or this has to do with the office, which would be very interesting to note, as Bukola has asked, in terms of which, whether there should be a generalization or whether there should be separate investigations. But from what we heard, the Zamfara state governor, because the last scandal which forced, I don't know whether to call it scandal or controversy, which forced the EFCC to not just issue a statement, because normally their response would be to issue a statement. We had a director come and address the press talking about the allegations against the former governor of Zamfara State, Governor Matawale. It was former Governor Matawale. And they were talking about the atrocities he committed. Former Governor Matawale fired back, saying that the EFCC chairman demanded a bribe in millions of dollars from him. What do we make of those kinds of brazen allegations against a sitting chairman of the EFCC? Should we take it with a pinch of salt, or should we really investigate what could have transpired?
Thank you, Makwe, and it's my delight. I may see you after a long time. I mean, although I see you regularly doing a good job. What I want to say generally is that both allegations should be investigated. The allegations made by Matawali should be properly investigated. The allegations against Matawali himself should be what? Properly investigated. We should, because it is possible, he has raised very serious, allegations against the person of the chairman of EFCC. And I'm not advocating that such allegations should be swept under the carpet. It should be properly investigated. And in conducting that investigation, no one can speak for Mr. Bawa. It is the quality of the investigation and the outcome that will be able to speak for him. In the same way, if Matawali, as a former governor, has case to answer, that case will also be properly investigated. We should not, we should take the two independently and do thorough investigation. So my advocacy is that we should always insist on quality investigation when allegations are made. And the fact that allegations are made against anyone, no matter how grievous, should not ordinarily lead us to jump into conclusions without seeing the outcome of such allegations. Because anybody can raise allegations. Anybody can be accused of any offense. What I'm insisting upon is that when allegations are made, we should deploy our crack team of investigators to go into the merits of the allegation and come out with a report. Because this country is bigger than anybody. No one is bigger than the law. No one should be insulated from the investigative and prosecutorial process because of his status, his or her status. And that is why I think the present administration, the Tinubu administration, ought to be encouraged, ought to be supported. Because in my view, the administration has started very well. And I have absolute confidence that this is one administration that will succeed because of, because it is determined to improve the process. So long as the administration stays on the path of respect for the rule of law, due process and accountability, the administration is assured of the support of small people like us. But if it derails, of course, we'll also be out to raise our voice to condemn. Because this country belongs to all of us. And this country is endowed in terms of human and material capacity. And we can, if things are going wrong, all of us should raise our voice. We have a collective stake in this enterprise. So that is why I'm not, as far as the Bawa issue is concerned, I want the law to take its course. But my advocacy is that the young man should be given fair hearing. And nobody should label him in the public space until his guilt or innocence is determined. Because it is Bawa today, it can be anybody tomorrow. Okay.
Mr. Shittu, let me just ask you quickly before we wrap up. The NBA has issued a statement concerning the statements made on the floor of the Senate by Senator Bulkachua about the former president of the Court of Appeal. And part of his statements, if you look at the second to the last paragraph of that statement, reads, quote, "It is in this regard that I call on Inspector General of Police and the chairman of the ICPC to immediately invite Senator Ahmed Mohamed Bulkachua for interrogation and proceed to prosecute him accordingly. I shall write a letter to both the IGP and the ICPC chairman in this respect." Well, clearly, several other persons, senior advocates, have spoken up on this matter. What do you expect? And did that statement take you by surprise? Because before now, there had been several conversations in the public concerning some judgments that had been handed down by the judiciary.
Well, I stand wholeheartedly by the statement issued by the NBA president. And I think everyone should be consigned about the integrity, the honor, and the independence of our judiciary. I know, as a matter of fact, that most of our judges have, peerless reputation. But we have some few bad eggs that are also, spoiling the reputation of the judiciary, tarring it with a general brush. So when Senator Adamu Bukachua made that statement, I felt disgusted. I felt alarmed. I was shocked. And I thought immediately he should have been arrested and then investigated. Because he has done a disservice, not only to the body of jurisprudence and the judiciary. If that allegation is not properly investigated, he may also have done a disservice to his wife, who was a former president of the Court of Appeal. We are talking of a former president of the Court of Appeal, somebody who has held a very, very high office, and whose actions and utterances ought to, guide. So I think this, the thing to insist upon is what the NBA president has done. Enlist the support of the Nigerian police or ICPC to immediately take the senator into custody and then investigate. He has to give us more details about the kind of assistance he rendered and how he manipulated the wife to favor his friends in chambers.
Well,
he has to give further particulars.
Yeah, as you said.
But as far as I'm concerned, no one can rubbish the integrity of the judiciary as an institution. Individuals may fall short of expectations, but that institution is critical to democratic governance, and it will endure. And I want to say clearly, openly, that majority of our judges have, peerless integrity. And in spite of what Adamu Bukachua said on the floor of the Senate, that integrity is intact.
Well, it's a good place to round this off for now, because I'm very sure that, it's an endless conversation, because there are those who are alleging that, hey, even the primary subject we were talking about, the Bauer conversation, may or may not be connected with the Naira policy, under Emefiele.
All kinds of speculations in the public space.
Yeah.
But let's stay focused on respect for rule of law, respect for due process, and integrity of the process.
And fair hearing.
Fair hearing, yes.
Mr. Wahab Shittu is a senior advocate of Nigeria. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
It's my pleasure. Always a pleasure to be with Janice.
Okay.
Yes.